That the siege itself has come a long way from the scenes that we saw yesterday morning. There are some 100 or so protesters still locked up in there. Our sources inside say that many of them are receiving medical attention. Of course, some of them won't have had much sleep over the last few days as they have been besieged by the police efforts to storm the building. But many may also be suffering from hypothermia as well and other difficulties with their health. Many, of course, overnight have been fleeing the building as much as they could. We saw images of people trying to abseil down parts of the building using makeshift ropes and other devices, and they were ultimately, in some cases, caught by police. And the concern will be that whilst Carrie Lam has talked about a peaceful resolution, those protesters that have been channeled through out of the Polytechnic University campus by police have ultimately been detained, and in some cases very aggressively by police as well. And as far as the protesters are concerned now, they essentially have three options. They can either still try to flee, they can surrender, or they can try and seek some sort of medical evacuation via ambulances or other emergency services like the fire crews that are in there at the moment as well. Whether the protesters consider there still to be an opportunity to resolve this peacefully is, of course, a key element in this. And whilst Carrie Lam may sound optimistic that that could be the case, still the resolve of these people that are still holed up in there remains as undimmed as it ever has done. And in the context of the violence that we have seen over the last week or so, there very much is still a huge question mark remaining about how this situation can be resolved peacefully.
Joel, I mean, we also heard the Chinese ambassador making sort of a very thinly veiled threat to the protesters, if you sort of read between the lines. I mean, is there any sense on the ground of sort of the diplomatic stakes rising in this case?
Well, I think protesters very much feel that there are two levels to this. There are obviously the skirmishes between them and the police that are happening daily here, that have focused obviously on the Polytechnic University campus over the last few days. But this is very much a diplomatic situation now. They are very aware of that. And in particular, as we see US politicians increasingly upping their rhetoric and the pressure that they seem to be putting on the Hong Kong government and the central government in Beijing. Really, this does look likely to be a situation that has to play out in some way in a diplomatic arena. We saw Mitch McConnell, for instance, the Senate Majority Leader, urging Donald Trump to speak out. We heard the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo overnight also weighing in on this crisis. He said that he doesn't believe police will be enough to bring a resolution to the broader unrest in this city. Interestingly, that also chimes with the comments that we've heard from Chris Tang, who is set to be sworn in today as the new head of police here in Hong Kong. He has told the South China Morning Post overnight that he also agrees with that sentiment, but he still thinks that Hong Kongers themselves who aren't involved in the protest need to be louder in their criticism of the violence that we have seen on the streets, and particularly of the violence that he believes the protesters are responsible for. The question mark, though, is what the government in Hong Kong does next to try and bring some sort of resolution. Certainly pro-democracy politicians here believe it needs a political solution. But at the moment, whilst Carrie Lam may be calling for a peaceful resolution, we still haven't seen anything substantial from the government in terms of efforts to try and bring about some sort of resolution that could allay the concerns of both protesters and those who are more supportive of the government itself.